welcome Ms. Lee. We've had the opportunity to meet before, but this is the committee on crisis in prisons that we formed to address some of the systemic issues. But I understand that you also have a very deeply personal, very sad story to share with us today, and we're here to hear it in its entirety. And we may have some questions for you at the end of it, if that's all right. You can proceed without Ms. Lee. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Stephanie Lee. My son Justin Wilkerson had just turned 20 when he was sentenced as a first offender. After what would have been 5.5 years, he had a TPM date set for September 30th of this year. He could have been given a second chance at life that he had earned. He was court-ordered to take prescribed meds and mental health counseling monthly. Justin had an extensive mental health history with multiple diagnoses, most significantly bipolar 1 mixed with severe psychotic behaviors, and multiple suicide attempts, at least 7 requiring level 2 mental health. In spite of his mental health issues, he did everything he could to stay out of trouble so he can come home, as evidenced by his disciplinary record. The entire 5 years he was in prison, he only had 1 disciplinary referral for contraband, smoking a cigarette, in which he stated he actually lit a wick to smoke a sausage. This was in February of 2017. Justin had obtained his GED 1 year prior to high school graduation. The prison did not offer any other programs to prepare for his release other than the required courses that he completed early on during his incarceration. And there was no rehabilitation, even though besides his mental health, he had a substance abuse problem. Justin never hurt anyone and wouldn't have unless he was offending himself or his family. Justin was always trying to help people by sharing with others and making them laugh. He never met a stranger and touched lives everywhere he went. The last year of his life was the worst. His biological father died tragically in a house fire, saving his grandson December 2019. The last time he saw me was on February 15th, 2020, before COVID shut the prisons down in March. June 10th through the 15th, Justin was placed in a crisis stabilization unit after an officer found him hanging in his cell and cut him down. A nurse practitioner had DC'd his meds 1 month prior, which was medical malpractice, secondary to noncompliance due to him not showing up to take his meds, even though they were not voluntary since he was court-ordered, and did so without completing the required Georgia GDC adherence counseling form. Justin should have been seen and evaluated since he was severely depressed. The day after he was released from CSU, he asked to use the phone to call me. 2 officers and a search officer took Justin and his cellmate out of their cell at night to a recreational cage away from cameras, had Justin's roommate assault him while handcuffed, and the search officer assaulted Justin to his face, ribs, stomach, and legs. He poured hot water on him and his father's obituary, and removed all of his personal belongings, even the mattress and cover, out of the cell, leaving him with nothing but the metal bed frame, denying him medical care for 2 days. I received calls from other cellmates reporting this, and it took that long to get through to Warden Hatcher. By that time, Justin hadn't showered in 6 days. Justin was taken to medical, pics were taken of his injuries, and investigation was started. I was assured that Warden Hatcher that the officers would not have contact with Justin. They did, and withheld food trays, starving him in solitary. Justin's weight had dropped from 209 pounds to 138 pounds. I reported this to Warden Hatcher, and nothing was done other than Justin being reimbursed $130 for his store food package after he filed a grievance. I asked to see Justin after this incident. Commissioner Timothy Ward refused, denying me the last time I could have seen my son alive due to COVID, even though as a registered nurse, I was working on the front lines in ICU. Justin had been transferred from close to medium to minimum level security to a TC. Because of the indifference shown, even when counselors and officers filled out urgent and even emergent mental health request forms, the GDC failed to address and treat his mental health needs, particularly the last 6 months of his life. December 10th, 2020, Justin was sent to Smith, one of the most dangerous prisons, and was not one of the 5 prisons reported that he could go to. He was sent there without the required interest system transfer form, and with no medications. Justin told me he was not receiving his meds. I called his counselor and medical, and he was seen a week later on December 17th, 2020. His meds ordered. I don't know when his meds were received or restarted. Justin was assaulted by a gang in an open cell on December 29th. Instead of placing him in a cell by himself or with an appropriate cellmate, Justin was placed in a closed cell with someone serving life without parole for malice murder. Less than a month after being transferred to Smith, and a week after being in isolation on January 5th this year, Warden Adams called me at 9:14 p.m. reporting Justin's roommate assaulted him. CPR started at 6:43 and AED applied. He was taken to the hospital and pronounced at 7:37. I should have been notified immediately as his next of kin. Justin's body was released to the coroner before I even knew he was killed. I obtained Justin's hospital records that document Smith State Prison officials witnessed Justin's cellmate choke him out at 6:35. They failed to intervene with a baton, mace, or taser until Justin was unresponsive with no respirations and no pulse, which were never regained. Warden Adams apologized to me for failure to do his job to protect Justin. Warden Hatcher stated that he would not place someone going home in a few months with a lifer. There has been no report of an incident, let alone a homicide, at Smith State Prison. Less than a month later, February 1st, there was announced a new warden of security was hired at Smith. I requested open records and was denied, stating that they were protected state secrets. The toxicology reports show the only substance in Justin's system was synthetic marijuana and his antidepressant Zoloft, but no trace of his prescribed antipsychotic, Zyprexa. The medical examiner still has not completed the autopsy report. This is over 8 months later. I haven't even been able to receive a death certificate. Justin's cellmate has still not been officially charged. There has been no accountability or transparency. I can't let Justin's death be in vain and swept under the rug. In other states, there are laws to protect first offenders from being placed in closed cells with lifers. If they're not in Georgia, I will advocate for that change and honor in memory of my son. Justin's TPM date was September 30th. That's 1 week from today. We should be celebrating his homecoming instead of grieving and mourning the loss of his life. Justin was not given a death sentence, but he received one because the GDC failed to protect Justin and placed him directly in harm's way. He paid the ultimate price with his precious life, and ours will never be the same. Justin taught me the meaning of love. He gave me purpose in his life and his death. Now that he no longer has a voice, I will be his voice and a voice for others for change and reform in the GDC.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lee. It's a devastating story. And I know that you've had to tell it over and over again. One thing that I'm struck by, and you can speak to this if you'd like, is just how bright a light he was in your life, and how one of the obstacles to prison reform in this state is that there is a narrative out there that the people inside those walls are somehow different in some fundamental way from the people outside the walls, us sitting here today. But the question I ask myself repeatedly when I look at these facilities is, if you put any human being in conditions like this, and you deny them the support they need, whether it's mental health or basic nutrition or whatever it might be, how can we expect people to survive, let alone thrive in those circumstances? And so I guess if you could speak to the difficulties, how you saw him change as a result of being forced to be in there.
I saw his spirit broken, even though most things he didn't share with me because he wanted to protect me. But he stayed strong. And even though he had mental health issues, he tried his absolute best to overcome those because, everyone else is telling him he has to be protected by a gang. He didn't want to be affiliated with gangs because he didn't want to have his sentence lengthened or to lose his life. He wanted nothing more than to come home. He was only 25. He had never been married. He didn't have any children. He wanted to be a dentist. He just wanted to come home, wanted to make me proud of him and show me that he was not the same kid that he was when he was locked up. And he would never be given that chance now.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Is there anybody else? Thank you so much for coming today, and we hear you, we see you, and we'll do everything we can.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is my son, Justin.
Justin Wilkerson.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, next,